Also at 1 o'clock Saturday, number 7 Kansas at number 15 Baylor. This one on ABC. Haslametrics makes Baylor a pretty decent 4-point home favorite here against the Jayhawks. Over under of 132.5. Projected seeds for the tournament at the moment: Kansas a 2 seed, Baylor a 4 seed. Eli, let's start with you in the Big 12 here. You and I have talked on past shows about some stark home road splits for Kansas, and it seems like this projected line from Haslametrics is maybe showing us that again here.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if it closes a little bit higher, just like the Wisconsin game in a sense. But for other reasons, Kansas not only lost outright to BYU, closed as an 8-point favorite at some shops, but Bill Self also mentioned after the game that Kevin McCullough, they're kind of treating this as, and sometimes you get coach speak, so it's hard to read between the lines, especially with a veteran coach like Self. But he's treating this, he said it verbatim post-game, like Kevin McCullough isn't coming back. And that's their best two-way player by a mile. And now you come to Baylor on the road after Kansas narrowly squeaked by Baylor the first time around at the Fog. Keep in mind Langston Love, who's still dealing with that ankle injury, the Bears' best three-point shooter, didn't play in that game, may be out for this one. But either way, Kansas can't space the floor well. 329th in perimeter scoring rate across college basketball. Haslam pretty much states the same thing. They allow, on the flip side, when it comes to three-point scoring rate, the highest in Big 12 play. And that has a lot to do with Hunter Dickinson struggling, per usual. We saw it at Michigan when he was there in drop coverage. Baylor, on the flip side, second best three-point shooting team in college hoops at over 40%. Big bounce back win against TCU on Monday night. Derek, I'll let you vent about that one in a second because I saw on Twitter you had the Horde Frog. So you could take things away in a moment. But Baylor only shot 30.8% from three at Allen Fieldhouse in the first game. Whether Love plays or not, I think Baylor gets right, at least in the context of bouncing back against Kansas at home in a revenge spot. Huge game also when you look at the Big 12 standings when it comes to Big 12 tournament. The Big 12 tournament, because these teams are tied for third in the conference standings right now. My raw numbers, I alluded to this earlier, make this closer to Baylor -6, especially if McCullough doesn't play. Some metric sites like Haslam don't always account. This isn't a knock at his site. You see it across analytics sites. They don't always account for key injuries like McCullough. He may bake it in after the fact or maybe Saturday morning once the news breaks. But if McCullough doesn't go, man, I could see Kansas getting thrown around and blown out at Baylor.
Yeah, this is a bad spot for Kansas without McCullough in the lineup. You know, he was really critical for them and against Baylor he was out that game, wasn't he? Against Baylor the last time. Yeah, he missed that game. Never mind. You know, it's a revenge spot for Baylor, and they rank 58th in adjusted defensive efficiency. Big reason why, though, is because they allow opponents to shoot 51% inside the arc, you know, or collect 51% of their points inside the arc, you know. And that's where Kansas wants to thrive, but without McCullough in there attacking the rim, man, it's a tough spot. And, you know, going back to their last game, they went under screens against DeJuan Harris, like, at will, and forced him to shoot from beyond the arc. It was just a tough spot for him. And, you know, without McCullough in there, it's just, I don't have any faith in Kansas. They're one of the worst road teams in college basketball. And going back to, you know, earlier this week, you know, I did have TCU in that game against Baylor. TCU causes a lot of turnovers, and they just weren't able to capitalize against Baylor. They were just playing this hot potato game where they threw it back to Baylor, you know, when they tried to leak out in transition. It was just
that first half sequence. I think that's what you're alluding to, right?
Yes, that first half sequence, that was just maddening to watch. And then I just stopped watching, you know, eventually after that, it's just tilting. So yeah, this is a good spot for Baylor, I think. Catching Kansas without McCullough, you know. So I lean Baylor in this game. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
In that first meeting, Baylor lost by 3 despite 21 turnovers against Kansas. So, I mean, Eli, that would be my follow-up question to you. it's not like that's a surprise for Baylor, and they're not exactly one of the better teams at protecting the ball offensively. So, despite those concerns, you still feel pretty decent laying more than a possession here?
To a point, because it always gets to that number or that kind of skeptical line where, and we've had this discussion numerous times, Derek and I have gone back and forth about it offline as well. I'm glad to have Derek on the podcast bringing up great points about Baylor going under ball screens, because without McCullough, I mean, you're going to force Harris into shooting threes, especially if Kansas gets down and you kind of have to make up points. But back to your point, Steven, Harris is an elite on-ball and off-ball defender for that matter, so he could create turnovers. And Kansas forced those turnovers, by the way, too, without McCullough. Still, though, on the road, I think it's a different story. The fog just gives you such a great home court advantage, on top of the fact that sometimes the officials can lean Kansas a little bit.
Wait, they have Lawrence, Kansas addresses, those officials? When they're at the
I think
fog,
so.
right?
Maybe getting some checks in their mailbox from Self
Oh,
himself
wow.
after the game.
Oh, real down the conspiracy rabbit hole here. I love it. Classic college basketball conspiracy theories.